Welcome to Simple SQL. Today we're going to be going over how to download and install a copy of Microsoft SQL Server and Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. To begin, I just went to a search engine and typed in download SQL Server, and I've got a match from Microsoft.com here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And that's going to show me a variety of editions of SQL Server that I can choose from. The one that I want to choose is Developer Edition. It has all the features of Enterprise Edition, but it's absolutely free for developers to use. And this will be the best one for us to learn on. We click Download Now, and we can see that our file is being downloaded, and we'll just go ahead and open that once it's complete. This puts us into a dialog window that lets us pick how we want to install, and we want to do a custom installation. It'll now ask us where we want to put the install media, and the default location is good for us. Once the install media has completed downloading, we'll be presented with the SQL Server Installation Center. We want to go to the Installation tab and pick the top choice to install a new SQL Server Standalone Installation. It's going to perform a few checks and then ask us if we want to use Microsoft Update to check for updates. I'm not going to select this option, but you are welcome to if you'd like to. We click Next. It does some more checks and makes sure that everything is okay with our install, and it gives us a warning about our firewall. This warning is going to tell us that our firewall is on, and that if we want to access SQL Server from outside of this machine, we're going to need to open up some ports. That's okay with us, and we're going to go ahead and go to the next screen. This asks us which edition we are attempting to install. We're wanting to install Developer Edition, which is free, so we do not have a product key that we need to enter. We're now presented with the End User License Agreement. Be sure to read through this carefully before you agree to it. I definitely did that before recording this video, so I don't feel like I need to do it again now. We're now in the feature selection, and while there are a lot of features available to us, the only one we want to pick at this time is the Database Engine Services. Leave everything else selected as it is or is not, and move forward. If we want to add more features later, we can come back to this. Now we're asked to use either a default instance or a named instance. In this case, we want to use a default instance. The only reason we would want to use a named instance is if we had multiple instances of SQL Server running on this computer. And because we don't, and this is our only one, a default instance is just fine. If you do have other copies of SQL Server running on your machine, then please make an informed decision about what you name this instance. The installer is now showing us which service accounts it intends to install and what account name it's going to use for those. These are the default ones, and these are NT Service and NT Authority accounts it's going to create. These are a little bit different than your normal Windows login accounts or your Active Directory accounts if you're at an organization. If you are at an organization, you probably want to use service accounts here. You might want to ask a system administrator about getting you service accounts, but for those of you who are learning SQL at home, these account names are probably fine. You'll note there's also a collation tab up here. We don't need to look at that right now because we do want the default settings. Let's go ahead and go to the next screen. Here we've got 5 additional tabs that let us do database engine configuration. The first thing we want to look at is authentication mode. By default, we're in Windows authentication mode, and we want to switch that to mixed mode. What that means is that we can use both Windows authentication, which is how you log into your computer or into other workstations around your office, or we can use accounts that only work within SQL Server. This is the one that we want, and because we're going to turn that on, it means we need to create a password for the system administrator. The system administrator has access to everything inside SQL Server, so please make sure you pick a strong password for this. In addition to putting in a password for the system administrator account, we also want to add the Windows account that we're going to be using. I'm going to be using the account I'm logged in with right now, so I'm going to click on Add Current User. If there's a different user account you plan on accessing SQL from, make sure you add that using the Add button instead. The other tab that we want to look at here is the memory. By default, it lets it use more memory than my machine has. So let's go ahead and change that to the recommended instead. And that's going to give it the ability to use up to 28 gigs of memory. When you do changes to the recommended, you're going to need to check the box down here that accepts the recommended memory configuration for SQL Server. Once you change to the recommended memory, go ahead and click on Next. This is a summary of the decisions that we've made so far and tells us what the installer is getting ready to do. We'll give this a quick look, make sure everything seems right. And go ahead and click on Install. Once SQL Server is complete installing, it'll show you which features it installed. You may have more features in your list than I do, as I've previously had this installed and uninstalled it to make this video. That's all there is to that. The next thing we need to do is get a copy of SQL Server Management Studio. If we click on the third option here, Install SQL Server Management Tools, should take us to a Microsoft web page, and we'll get a Download SQL Server Management Studio link. And this is commonly referred to as SSMS. We'll click on this link to download the installer. And once it finishes downloading, we'll click on Open File. This will prompt us to install SQL Server Management Studio. We can go ahead and leave the default path and click on Install. Once the installation is completed, close the installer window, and then click on your Start button and type SSMS. You should see Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Go ahead and hit Enter on that, and we'll launch Management Studio and confirm that we can connect to our server. In the server name field, it may have the name of your computer or it may have localhost. Let's go ahead and clear that out and type localhost. If during the installation you gave yourself an instance name, go ahead and put a slash in the instance name after localhost. If you followed along and went with the default instance, this should be all you need to do. Go ahead and click on Connect, and in the Object Explorer, we should now see that we're connected to localhost. In our next video, we're going to go over creating our first database and looking at some of the options that it comes with, but this is it for now. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you later.